If you've ever taken the IELTS speaking test before and you've thought, well, my English was good, so why didn't I get a band 7? Well, this is the video for you. Now, most candidates don't lose marks because of grammar. They lose marks because they play it too safe. Today, I'll show you the difference between safe answers and strong answers from an examiner's point of view. So when an examiner listens to your speaking, we're not checking if your English is perfect. We're listening for decisions and what you choose to say and how you develop an idea and whether your English moves forward or plays it safe. So let me show you what that means. So I'm going to give you an example, and the example will be the same question, but different answers with different decisions made by the candidate. And the question is, describe a success you are proud of. Okay, so the safe answer to this, around about a band 6 perhaps, I want to talk about when I helped my best friend to prepare for her important exams. It happened last year around March or April, I think. My friend was really stressed because the exam was very difficult as she needed good marks to get into university. So I decided to help her. What I did was first, we made a study timetable together, and then we studied every evening after classes. I explained some hard topics to her, like in maths and science, and we did many practice questions. We also took breaks to eat snacks or drink coffee, which made it more enjoyable. In the end, she passed all her exams with quite good results, better than she expected. That's why I felt proud, because I could support my friend in difficult time, and it helped her to achieve her goal. I think also made our friendship stronger. I think helping others is very important. Okay, so nothing terrible about this answer. What would the examiner think? Well, the examiner, first of all, would think this is an extremely predictable topic. In fact, this topic is one of the most predictable and most used answers for this question, possibly the most. It is therefore a predictable topic that the examiner has heard a lot. This means it's zero risk because it's the kind of topic that sounds like it needed practice before you came to the exam. And it's got low ownership. What does low ownership mean? It means you don't own it. It doesn't sound like it's your answer. It sounds like it's a memorized answer that many people memorize, not just in your country, perhaps in lots of other countries, especially places that have a lot of schools teaching how to pass the IELTS exam. It's one of these very standardized answers. Therefore, the highest you could possibly get with this kind of standardized answer is a 6. If you wanted to get higher, you need to choose a better topic, for example. So let's look at why this answer cannot reach a band 7. Well, to the examiner, this answer signals that you are not being spontaneous. This is not a spontaneous answer. And the idea of the examination is that you are spontaneous and natural sounding. Often when you memorize answers, you do not sound the same as when you're speaking naturally because it's not spontaneous. It's not very personal, therefore it's not genuine. If it's not genuine, it's probably been practiced before, and if the examiner has heard this answer from thousands of students, then it suggests to him that, nope, I don't believe it. Of course, this all means it's possibly a memorized answer. Although the examination is about your English, examiners also have to listen for answers that are memorized. And as I said, when you speak, you can often hear it, but you can also hear in many other ways to recognize the memorized answers. It feels like an act. It feels like a performance. It doesn't feel real. And you're supposed to, in the test, you're supposed to be communicating with the examiner for real. Let's look at a stronger version. I'll read little pieces because this example is quite long. You can pause the video and look closer later. The stronger answer begins like this. Honestly, one of the things I'm really proud of is pushing myself to overcome my lifelong fear of public speaking by actually going on stage in a small amateur theatre production a couple of years ago. Okay, so you're already being specific on a different topic, if you notice. The next paragraph begins like this. I've always been the kind of person who gets butterflies, or more like full-on panic attack, at the thought of everyone staring at me while I talk. So now we're getting very personal about the person's feelings, not just even now, but in the past also. The next paragraph begins, at first I was terrified with personal feelings being described. On the actual night, on the very specific, it wasn't day, it was night, the specific night, this specifically happened. And then you finish by saying why you felt so proud, and again, you follow it with detail. So what the examiner is thinking here is that this is more of a specific and intentional topic choice. So you've decided not to go for the obvious, I help my friend pass an exam, and instead you're talking about a personal fear you have. That allows you to talk about personal things because fear can be different for different people. There's always the possibility that somebody else has talked about public speaking, for example, and the fear of public speaking. But this again means that you would have to be more specific to make it real. But as I said, this answer has a personal perspective. It tells you about feelings in the past and the present, and feelings on the night and how it went, etc. So that personal perspective makes it feel real, and that's through vocabulary, but also the specific structure, the explanation, the examples to make it real. It's a highly controlled answer. It has a clear structure, and it doesn't say firstly, secondly, thirdly. It uses more natural expressions. But the structure where you say immediately what you're going to talk about, then you go on explaining in detail, and then possibly making it real with specific examples from the particular time. Okay, that's a strong version. That's how it really should be. So the score potential would be 7 and above, depending on the rest of the exam. But again, what's it about? It's about, firstly, the decision you made not to talk about the same topic that everyone else talks about. That is a safe way of getting a particular mark, but instead you took a chance and you tried to talk about something personal and then naturally talk about it instead of preparing it for 2 months. And this would be recognized by the examiner, particularly if we go back just for a second and you look at some of the expressions. So it's not about vocabulary that I'm talking about here, but if you look, the expressions suggest that the student is talking spontaneously. Like, honestly, one of the things I am really proud of, these little expressions suggest that the person is naturally speaking. So if we heard them, we can tell the difference between the sound of natural speaking and the sound of memorized. Let's look at why safe answers sound trained. First of all, as I've mentioned, safe answers sound vague. And why are they vague? Because you often learn them, but you don't know the exact phrasing of the question until you go to the exam. So you have to be vague with a memorized answer. Secondly, they're empty. They don't feel real. There's no detail to these answers that make them specific in any way. So it's like empty answers that don't really mean anything. Thus, they're what's called generic, the kind of answer you give in this situation that everyone gives in this situation, but there's nothing personal about it. It's over-rehearsed. Now, often a student, when they over-rehearse something, they don't sound natural, for example. It sounds like they've practiced it so often that there's no feeling there. And as I said, it's the same as many, many other candidates. And this is true no matter where you go in the world. You end up sounding like the same candidate that the examiner interviewed 20 minutes ago. You get the same answers over and over again. And this is what the examiner's thinking. It's the same as the last guy. If nothing sounds real and nothing sounds personal, you're not really achieving anything high in the band's scores. In order to do that, you need to be personal, and personal usually means feeling and a little bit of detail you do naturally. So let's look at what examiners actually hear when listening to safe answers. This is what they're saying to themselves. I've heard this already. I've heard this from the previous candidates, the same answer. This sounds trained. Almost the same words as previous candidates. It sounds like there's no feeling. This isn't your thinking. It could be anybody's thinking. And this doesn't feel real. These are the things that the examiner is thinking while you're talking. He disconnects and thinks, I've heard it already. Same answer as everyone else. This is not good. It's memorized language, and the descriptors do tell examiners to listen for memorized answers, memorized language, and then do not count it. Let's look at part 3. And this is where judgment of the candidate, the decisions the candidate makes, can be exposed for the examiner to see very clearly. So the part 3 question will be like this. Do you think success means the same thing for everyone? Let's look at a safe version first. I think success means different things for different people because everyone has different goals. Immediately, as an examiner, when I look at that, I have heard this phrase means different things for different people many, many times from candidates. However, let's look at an examiner reaction to this answer. All right, so you could say everything in it looks and sounds correct, but it's saying nothing. It says nothing. It's just like a little cover to cover the answer without any depth at all. No detail, no depth. There's no stance, there's no point of view or opinion stressed here, no feeling really. There's no weighting, there's no sizing things up. Therefore, you activate the score cap, which means immediately the examiner is thinking this is a limited answer. These are all the indications of a limited answer. This is a person playing safe, nothing terribly wrong grammatically. However, it feels empty. There's nothing inside. This time, let's look at a strong version. You could say has the same English level as far as grammar, etc. However, it uses better judgment. It makes better decisions. In theory, success is personal. In practice, societies still reward very narrow definitions, mainly money and status. All right, so is the grammar very difficult in that one? Let's have a look. So this time the examiner listens and he hears not emptiness, but kind of abstract control. In theory, success is personal. In practice, society still reward very narrow definitions. So you're talking this time about more abstract ideas. It has nuance. It tells you little differences in theory and in practice. This suggests also you're evaluating when you're talking and giving an answer. Therefore, this suggests there's more inside your answer. You've decided to talk about and hint about things that are not just empty and vague and could answer everything. You're being a little more precise and evaluative in theory. So that means something. In practice, comparing it, societies still reward very narrow definitions, mainly money and status, suggesting that there could be other definitions, etc. Therefore, this is not an empty answer, and it should go on to explain the ideas that they're talking about. And there's a lot to talk about because there are ideas inside. It's not an empty answer. Therefore, safe answers do not protect your score. They limit your score so that you cannot get to the high marks. When we look at strong answers are not safer, but they are definitely clear. Safe answers are not wrong, but they're invisible. And why are they invisible? Because they disappear into all the other answers that the examiner hears all the time. Also, we have fake stories. Fake stories are generic stories examiners don't believe. They're little stories that you learn, and other candidates learn the same stories before they go to the examination, and then they tell this story to the examiner, pretending it is real. So generic stories examiners do not believe. What does generic mean? Well, anyone could say the same story, and anyone could apply the same story to their own life. So, for example, a candidate says, "My grandmother always said life is like a box of chocolates." There have been many students who tell this story as if it's real and personal. What's the examiner thinking? The examiner thinking this is not real and personal. This is not genuine. This is a memorized story, and this particular story is actually a story from a film. Therefore, the examiner is not going to give you one of the high marks because, again, it's not only vague, but it's generic. Anyone could say this story, and it's not real. There is also the pronunciation giveaway. And this is a red flag to the examiner also. It's an alarm that tells the examiner something's not right about this candidate's answer. Pronunciation suddenly changes. The rhythm becomes unnatural. What does that tell you? You're talking, and then suddenly your pronunciation changes, and the rhythm is not sounding the same. It doesn't go up and down the way you were talking 1 minute ago. It has changed. Perhaps it's gone flat, for example. What does that tell you? Well, it sounds like your rhythm and stress and your intonation have been rehearsed or practiced. Therefore, it suggests it's another memorized answer. Doesn't lower your score, however, it limits your score because this is not real, this is not genuine, and the language doesn't sound genuine either. Therefore, you cannot get the high mark. If you want to move from safe answers to strong answers, ask yourself this question. Did I actually make a choice in my answer? Did I decide what I wanted to talk about? Or was that choice made by someone else in the class a couple of weeks ago where I learned it? Ask yourself this question. Does this sound like my thinking? Does it sound like it comes from me? Does it have the feeling and the detail that sounds like it comes from me? Or does it sound empty and vague? Ask yourself this. Would a real person say this naturally? These words that are coming out of my mouth, would a real person say this? Remember, strong answers come from decisions first, not initially from vocabulary. Of course, you need good vocabulary and good grammar, but you have to make a strong decision first and not decide to play safe. What are examiners really asking themselves when they listen to your speaking? They're asking themselves, Is this candidate clear? Do I know what they're talking about? Do I understand the words, etc.? So is this specific? Does it have detail? Does it make it real with actual detail that I believe? Is this your answer or someone else's, a memorized answer? Does this candidate sound genuine or is this a performance? Therefore, in this video, let's look at the examiner's verdict. So the examiner's verdict is safe answers don't lower your score, but they do limit your score. And it means that your English is competent, it's okay, but it's easily forgotten. And so there's nothing for the examiner to particularly remember in order to give you that higher score. If this video has made you realize something uncomfortable about your English, well, that's a good sign, because moving from safe to strong is not about learning lots of new phrases and perfect grammar. It's about learning to change your judgment and what a good answer in IELTS is. And this cannot be done immediately, overnight, or in one video. So I'm developing this into a structured training path for both speaking and writing, focused on IELTS examiners' decision making and what they want. I've outlined the whole structure on a page, and if you're curious to see what is next, you can click the links below. I'll see you next time.